off till you get to me. Thanks.
All right. I've got a couple people we're waiting to come in. Welcome on in. Good afternoon. Going to give it a few minutes here, minute or two, and let people trickle in, and we'll get things started here. Pretty good turnout today with 38 registrations. I'll say another minute. Okay. Well, I think we can kick this thing off here. We'll let people trickle in as we begin. So I'd say welcome. Thank you for joining us and good afternoon. My name is Jacob Heath. I'm a client success manager here at CompuWorks, a SourcePass company. We're going to get into Excel for Leaders today is the title of our webinar. So a lot of you may be familiar with Excel. I'm sure you are, especially if you are leaders. And in this section here, we're going to go over ways where you can better utilize Excel for leadership and leading your team. So definitely stay tuned. It's going to be a good one today. Before we get into it, let's talk about the next webinar coming up. So on October 24th, I know this one's on a Thursday, but October 24th, we're going back to our normal Tuesday afternoons. That's going to be an intro to Microsoft Loop. So that's sort of another cloud sharing service through Microsoft. If I understand it, it's fairly new to me, so certainly going to want to check that out if you are involved in the Microsoft suite. It's just another tool in the tool belt, another thing integrated into 365, and certainly going to be something you want to check out. So stay tuned and join us for October 24th, 1:30. Before we get into it, some etiquette for the meeting. If you've got any questions, you can always put them in the Q&A button down at the bottom right next to the chat. We'll try to answer them as we go, but any questions that aren't answered, we've got a little bit of time afterwards, and we'll answer it with Jolynn at the end of the webinar today. I normally would be introducing you to Alan here. He's not joining us for today's session, so let me introduce you to Jolynn, our presenter. Hi, Jolynn.
Well, hello there, Jacob. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. So today's session being Excel for Leaders, this is something that I really look forward to as a session. Hoping everyone else is looking forward to this as well. Oh yeah, you guys send out the handouts later. So let's go ahead and get started with our session, Jacob. So I'm going to open up a practice file that I have that's going to include some things already created here in Excel. And just so everybody knows some of the topics that I actually want to be covering with you here today, we're going to be talking about first, and these are all really related to people that are going to be managing other people, but really just getting comfortable in some of these additional tools in Excel. I feel like sometimes we're using this application and we don't really take full advantage of some of the features and the efficiencies. I think a big part of it is understanding there's some pretty easy to use tools that can definitely help us manage our data. So one of the first topics is going to be talking about named ranges. I'll get into what that means and how to create them and then how to use them. We're also going to be talking about managing worksheet data, talk a little bit on sorting, filtering, but I'm going to throw in a function with that as well. Talk about turning everything into a table to make your life much easier. Then we're going to be getting into quite a few different types of functions. I'm going to be talking about if functions. I'll talk about a couple of date functions, and we'll be getting into some lookup functions today. Briefly talk about charts as well. So lots of different topics to cover. So let's get started. So the first thing is talking about named ranges. If this is a feature in Excel that you have never used before, let me explain it and some of the benefits of using a named range. So typically you'll go to a cell, click on it, and in the name box at the top left, it will give you the name of your active cell, which is great that you know which column and which row you are in to know what cell you're on. But sometimes when we go to create a formula, we want to be able to create a formula that is referring to a cell, and we want it to stay that cell even if we copy that formula down. That would be called an absolute reference, where we want to always refer to a one cell but be able to copy that formula down and keep it that cell. We could use dollar signs to do that, which can be confusing to some people when they see the dollar signs. I know it was confusing to me until I figured them out. Instead, when you name a cell, we name it based on what's in the cell. And when you do that, it becomes an absolute reference. So we don't have to worry about those dollar signs. We're going to use the named range in the formula instead of the cell or range of cells. I use named ranges also to navigate throughout my workbook. I use it if I'm going to be creating multiple formulas on the same range of data over and over again. I'm going to name them so I don't have to keep going back and selecting the cells, especially when we talk about the fact that we have over 1,048,576 rows and over 16,000 columns across. That's a lot of data. And if we had to keep selecting, a million rows going down or, 1,700 cells going across, that's wasting our time. So by naming them, we can use them in the formula. A formula is going to be easier to understand when it has a named range as well. Now, of course, there's several other benefits that we can get to in another session with, Scenario Manager and all these other tools that truly take advantage of named ranges. But for today, I'm just going to do a couple of demonstrations on creating named ranges and managing them. Starting with cells G1 and G2. G1 and G2. I'm going to use those in a formula in a minute. And when I do, I want to be able to create the formula once and copy the formula down for other cells. For me to be able to do that and to utilize these as an absolute reference, I'm going to name them. So one way to name a cell is to select the label and the cell you want to name. So the label, the text, can be used to name the cell. I'm going to select F1 through G2, F1 through G2. Then I'm going to go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon. There's a Defined Names group. I'm going to click Create from Selection, and it knows that I selected text, which is in the left column. It's going to use that text to name the cells in the right column. All I do is click OK. How do I know it worked? Well, if I click on G1 and look at the name box, it says sales underscore goal. If I go to G2, it's called commission underscore rate. The reason I put the underscore to separate the two words is because there was a space. Spaces are not allowed in the guidelines for names. So no spaces in the names. You can use uppercase, lowercase. You can name it up to 250 3 characters or 255, but technically only 253 can be displayed in the name box. A lot of silly rules. You just want to name it based on what it is. Name it based on what it is. So let me talk first about, I'll go into more named ranges here as we go, but let me do a formula. So let's say that I want to create a formula that is going to add together all the totals in row 9. Very common to use the auto sum. A shortcut to that is the way that this data is set up, I can just simply select the blank cells where I want the answers to go, click the auto sum button, and it automatically added those together. These formulas are pretty easy to understand when we look at the formula in the formula bar. It says sum and it gives the range of cells. That's pretty easy to understand. But if we had put dollar signs with it to lock a cell down, some people will start to get a little confused on what it's really doing. So I'll demonstrate the named range as well. But before I do that, I'm going to create totals for column F individually going across for each employee. Once again, I'm just going to select the blank cells, click auto sum, and it automatically copies that across for each individual employee. I don't have to create the first one and copy it down. When we copy a formula, it just moves down or across depending on which direction. So it moves down each row or across the columns. But I want to create a column of commissions for each of the salespeople, where I want to take their total sales and multiply it by the commission rate of 4% coming from G2. But I'm not going to do G2 with the dollar signs to be able to copy it down. I'm going to use the named range. So I'm going to start on G5. I'm going to do equal F5 asterisk for multiply. I'm going to click on G2, but it's not going to type G2 because I had named that cell. It's going to automatically put the name commission rate. I'm going to control enter so I stay on that cell and complete the formula. And when you look at the formula in the formula bar, it makes more sense. It's taking the total sales from F5 multiplied by the commission rate. And because it's a named range, I can copy that down with my fill handle, copy it down for all of the other employees. But let me show you another benefit to that named range called commission rate. I'm going to go to the let me go to let me go to the February calls sheet, just as an example. If I wanted to go to Q5 and create a formula using that commission rate, I could do equal to start my formula, choose the cell that I want to multiply by the commission rate, do my asterisk. I could start typing CO, and from my drop-down list, you get the functions that begin with those letters. They have a circle with an FX on the left-hand side. But a named range is going to give you the squares with the blue squares. I can double-click on commission rate, control enter, and it's taking that 4% and multiplying it by whatever cell I had selected. So another benefit is the named ranges can be used on any sheet within the workbook, because by default, the scope is available for all sheets within your workbook. And if I go to the name box at the top left, click on the down arrow, it's going to show me every named range that has the scope of the entire workbook. There's a couple that I didn't create, or one that I didn't create. It's called visitor data. If I click visitor data, it's going to navigate me to this maps worksheet and select the cells related to that named range. If I click on the drop down for the name box again, click commission rate, it's going to navigate me back to the cell that has the commission rate. So we can use it to navigate. I could even do it based on a hyperlink to get to that named range. I do those in my dashboards. But let me create another formula. As a matter of fact, this was actually supposed to be a different number on the sales goal. Let me change the sales goal. I'm going to say that the sales goal is 24,150. So we're going to say that the employee's yearly sales goal is on G1. And what I want to do is go to H5 and create a formula using an if function. We want to know if their total sales is greater than or equal to sales goal. And if it is, if that's true, I wanted to say yes. If it's false, I wanted to say no. So I'm going to be using an if function to do this. If functions are covered, I'll do a little bit more of those a little bit later, but I want you to kind of see how this named range can be used. So on H5, I'm going to do equal the letter I. I'm going to press my tab key so it gives me my required function name and left paren. And then I could either click on FX to complete it, or I could just physically type the rest of the syntax of the arguments for this formula. So the whole thing, technically, they call it a syntax, but each individual in the parens, each individual section is called an argument. So when I'm looking at this screen tip right now, it wants to know, what is the logical test? Well, I want it to look at the total sales to see if they are greater than, equal to the sales goal. When I click G1, it enters sales goal. So that's my logical test. I'm going to put in a comma to go to the value if true. It's going to be the word yes, and that has to be in quotes because it's text. And then I'm going to say, if that's false, I want it to be the word no. So basically, I'm saying, look at their total sales, and if it's greater than or equal to the sales goal of G1, I want you to say yes. But if it's false, say no. I'm going to control enter, and the first person is a no because they only have 23,000. They aren't greater than or equal to 24,150. But because I used the named range for G1 of sales goal, I can copy this formula down for the other employees, and you're going to see 2 people qualified for matching the sales goal, 2 did not. Of course, if the values change, just like with any formula, if any of these numbers change, so will the answers to any of these formulas, even if it's an if. So if Kendra James for Q1 really had $10,000, as soon as I press enter, it's going to update every formula related to that cell. So now she has met her sales goal. So by using the named range, it's automatically an absolute reference. I'm going to continue to talk about named ranges here, but before we do a couple more formulas, I want to talk about managing your worksheet data. So when you start a blank new worksheet, you get one sheet. In your sheets, you can, of course, name them, move them around, and do all kinds of things with them. But it's the data inside the sheets that we need to manage. And one of the things that we do is, and I'm going to go to the worksheet called subtotal. Here I have a whole bunch of orders for products. It's got their invoice number, who their salesperson was, the company, the product they ordered, etc. And I want to be able to analyze this data. Well, if I start scrolling down to look at this information, I can no longer see the heading at the top. So row 1 is the headings. If I want to always be able to see those, we can freeze the panes. Freeze panes allows us to freeze rows and or columns of data. We do this by going to the View tab of the ribbon, and then in the window group, click Freeze Panes. You'll get 3 choices. If I want to freeze whatever is visible as my top row, I can click Freeze Top Row. If I want to freeze whatever is actively my first column, I could use first column. But if I want to use Freeze Panes, that's going to allow me to choose multiple columns and multiple rows. As an example, let's say that I want to freeze row 1 and A and B. If I want to freeze row 1 and columns A and B, when I navigate, when I move around, I would need to click C2. If I'm on cell C2, it's going to freeze anything above me and anything to the left of me. I'm going to go back to freeze panes, click freeze panes, and now as I scroll down, row 1 is frozen. If I scroll to the right, columns A and B are frozen. So by using the freeze panes, it allows you to choose exactly what you want to freeze. So I do that anytime that I'm using a large enough amount of data that I'm going to navigate and not be able to see the headings. So freeze panes is very common. If you change your mind, you can always go back to freeze panes and click unfreeze panes, and that will put you back to normal again. Okay. Also, when you're working with a range of data like this, a lot of times you want to sort the information. Like, let's say that I actually want to sort by salesperson. I can click anywhere in the salesperson's column, and I usually go to my data tab, although that's not the only place to sort. I can go to my data tab to the sort and filter group, click A to Z, and it's going to automatically sort based on the column I was physically clicked in. Just so you know, it can do that. If I want to sort by more than one column, though, that's when I would go into the sort icon. So here in that sort and filter group, if I click the sort icon, I can choose to sort by as many columns as I would like. All I do is tell the computer, what do I want to sort by? I can add levels to add multiple columns. So I'm going to say I want to sort by country, then by salesperson, then by order date. The order date comes in as oldest to newest, text comes A to Z. I'm going to change the date to say newest to oldest instead. As soon as I click OK, I'm first organized by country, then by the salesperson, then by that order date. So sometimes we want things to be in a specific order, and this would be one way to do that. But also when you're using a list like this, a lot of times you want to limit the information you're seeing, and you want to filter. And you want to sort. We can do that by turning on filters. Also on the data tab of the ribbon, I'm going to click on the icon for filter. By default, it will add a drop-down arrow for every one of my column headings, where if I click on salesperson, it's going to give me a unique list of every salesperson. But at the top of this, it's going to give me sorting capabilities. So I can sort and filter the rows of data. So let's say that I don't want to see everybody's orders. I'm really focusing on just Janet's orders. So I'm going to click in front of Janet, and I'm going to click OK. It now is only showing the orders that Janet was the salesperson for. If I look at my status bar at the bottom left, it's going to tell me that there's 215 orders for Janet out of a total of 1,464 records. So it looks at every row as being one record of information together. So they always stay together. Everything in a row, when we sort and filter, they stay together. If I wanted to filter even by something else, maybe I actually want to filter to just see the orders that were placed in USA. I could go to the country column. It's going to give me a unique list of all the countries. I'm going to uncheck the select all. I'm going to scroll down and choose USA. I'm going to click OK. There's 47 total orders placed by Janet as the salesperson for companies in the USA. So we have the ability to really limit what we want to see. But I'm going to clear those filters, and I'm going to create two formulas. I'm going to go to L1, and I'm going to assume everybody has created the auto sum before. I'm going to do an auto sum, but what I want to do it based on is the extended price. I want to get a grand total of all of the extended prices. So I'm going to select the extended prices, create a sum, I have J2 through J1465 selected. So I'm seeing the grand total of all of those orders. I'm going to do that same thing, but using a different function. I'm going to use a function called a subtotal instead. So on M1, I'm going to do equal SU. That will bring up a list of functions that begin with the letters SU. I'm going to double click on subtotal. So it types the rest of it for me and gives me my required left paren. Then it's going to give me a drop-down list of all these different function names. 1 through 11 allow us to filter based on the rows of data that we limit. It will add together or give me an average or count, max, min. It can do all these different functions by using one formula. If I want to add together all of those extended prices, I can double click on 9-sum. 9 is the hidden code to the computer to let it know I want to use the sum function. I put in a comma to separate my arguments, and then I can choose what is the range of cells I want it to add together. I'm going to do the extended price again. I'm going to do J2 through J1465 so that you can actually see I get the same answer. They might have different formatting, but I get the same exact answer no matter which formula I just did. So why would I ever use a subtotal as my function? Well, the reason I would do that is if I filter my data. So let's say that I only want to see the quantity column if they ordered 50 or more. I'm going to go to quantity. I'm going to hesitate on number filters. I'm going to go to greater than or equal to, and I'm going to put in 50 because I only want to see if the number of quantity was greater than or equal to 50. So now I'm filtered. I have 152 total orders, but the subtotal answer changed. So the subtotal will change as you filter your data. The sum does not. So if I use a regular average, it's not going to change the answer. But if I use the subtotal and use the number 1 instead of a 9, it's going to change as I filter my data. So a lot of times for me, I use a subtotal and the regular function because I still need to see the grand total, but I also want to be seeing the limited records of information total. It's pretty awesome how we get the ability to do that. But when we're talking about all this filtering, the sorting, and we want to format our data and do all this information to our data, sometimes just turning the filters on, having to freeze panes manually, having to format all my cells, I don't like to do all of that. I'm going to take this list of employees for my employees worksheet. I'm going to turn this range of cells into a table because a table is going to give me freeze panes. It's going to give me formatting. It's going to give me the ability of creating totals at the bottom of my list. It allows a lot of different things to happen within your range of data that we would otherwise have to do manually. So if you haven't used a table before, I would highly recommend using them. My heading has already been formatted. I'm just going to clear out that formatting. I don't need it to be formatted, just so you could see. So I'm going to get rid of the formatting. But I want to put this all into a table. I'm going to do that by going to the Insert tab of the ribbon. I'm going to click the icon for table on the left-hand side. It puts marching dashes around the range of cells. I'm going to click OK. And now this range of cells is inside a table. It's got some pretty dark blue formatting to it, but I'll change that in a second. But row 5, it knew was my headings. If I scroll down, it freezes those headings. So instead of it saying A, B, C, D, it's going to say the names of each of the headings if I can't see the top of my list. So that's one benefit. Another benefit to turning this into a table is we get the filtering and sorting automatically. So if I go to the drop down for department, I automatically get my sorting and my filtering capabilities. That's a great feature. But we also have a tab on the ribbon that is related to formatting and managing other aspects of the table. We have this table design tab. There is a table style options group that we can go to turn on and turn off different features inside the table. Right now I have banded rows turned on, which means every other row is going to look different. It really makes a list like this easier to read, but this is a little bit too much color for me. So I'm going to go to the table styles. As I hesitate on the icons, I can get a live preview to see what it would look like. But on the right-hand side, I could click on the drop down to see the full menu where I could have light, medium, and dark categories, and I could choose any of these options. Some of these are a little bit more subtle than others. I'm going to choose one of the medium, and this is very easy to read now. I don't want to have to do this myself for formatting, selecting every other row and applying formatting. Plus, if you manually apply formatting to every other cell, when you go to filter, it keeps the formatting based on the cell, so it's going to look silly. Here with a filter, if I filter by department, and let's say I only want to see HR, it keeps the banded rows as you filter. That's a huge benefit. But let me go back and clear that out. Another benefit with a table is if you look at that table design tab, in this table styles, there's a feature called total row. If I click total row, it's going to jump me to the bottom, and it added a row 52 called total, where every cell in that row can be a different formula. If I go to the department, that's text. If I click on the drop down arrow, I could count, but I can't really use a sum or things like that. Let's say for their salary, I want to get an average. If I go to the salary column in this total row, click on the drop down arrow, I can get an average of all the salaries for all the employees. So we can easily create formulas and have this total row without manually having to do it ourselves. Lots of benefits to using a table. Lots of benefits. But if you change your mind and you decide you don't want this to be a table anymore, you can always go to the table design tab on the left-hand side in the tools group. You can click convert to range, confirm that yes, you want this to be a normal range of cells, and the table tools will disappear. It doesn't take the formatting that was there. The formatting stays. And if I scroll down, so did row 53 with those totals, but it's using subtotal functions, just so you can see. So tables are a wonderful feature. Usually if I apply them, I don't remove them, but highly recommend them for sure. Back to formulas again. I want to talk because when you are a leader in an organization, whether you're a supervisor, a manager, or an executive, doesn't matter. We have some certain formulas that we typically use in Excel. Some of those I've already covered, but I want to add a few more. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go to, let me go to back to the quarterly sales worksheet for a second. So on this quarterly sales worksheet, one of the things that I did was I used the if function to say, if this, do this. But we have a lot of other options that we can use besides just an if. But the if family of functions, because there's quite a few, are always looking for, I want you to evaluate this. Whatever this is, if it's true, do this. If it's false, do this. So they have some similarities by the if part of them. But what I'm actually going to do is in this employees list, I'm going to create a sum if, where I want to add together all of these salaries, but only if their department is sales. I want it to look for the department to be sales and add the numbers in the salary if the department is sales. Because I'm going to be using those, I'm going to be using department, salary, etc. I'm going to name these cells so that I can use the named range in my formula. First, I'm going to select B6 down through B50. Well, I could do B53, it doesn't matter. I'm going to select that whole column. I'm going to click in the name box, and I'm going to name this department. So that's another way I can name a range. I'm going to do the same thing for the salary. I'm going to click at the top of the salaries. I'm going to select all the way down. I'm going to click in the name box. I'm going to name that range of cells salary. So I can name a cell by going to the name box. So now I'm going to use them in a formula. So I'm going to go to I2. I'm going to do equal SU. SU will bring up any of the functions that begin with those letters. I'm going to double click on sum if. I'm going to double click on sum if because I want it to type it for me and give me my left paren. When you look at this arguments, right now it wants to know what is the range of cells I want it to evaluate. I want it to look at the departments. So I'm going to start typing DE. I'm going to type DE. From that list, I'm going to double click on department. It selects all those in column B for me. Then it wants to know what is the criteria coming from that department. I'm going to do comma. I'm going to put in quote, sales, quote. Sales is what I want it to find out of that department column. Because it's text, I have to put it in quotes. The named range is not technically text. Even though it looks like text, it's not text. Then it wants to know what is the range of cells I want to add together if the department is sales. That's going to be the salary. So if I type S, I'll get the list of functions that begin with S. I can double click or tab on the word salary, Control Enter, and it's going to add together only the salaries where the department is sales. It's adding together only if it's sales. So it looks for sales, goes across, and takes the number from the column for salary and adds those all together. So it's adding it if it matches the criteria. That's pretty cool. Well, I'm going to actually do another if. I'm going to go to J2 and I'm going to do a count if. What this does is counts the number of cells that match the criteria. So what if I wanted to count how many departments are sales? So how many of these employees are in the sales department? I'm going to do equal COU. COU. There are several different counting functions. I'm going to use COUNTIF. I'm going to double click on COUNTIF. Then I'm going to choose what is the range of cells that I wanted to evaluate. That's going to be the department. Comma, what is the criteria? It's going to be sales. So I put that in quotes. I can then Control Enter, and I can see that there are 21 people that are currently in the sales department. Now, of course, if any of these change, like let's say that the first person, John, he actually moved to the accounting department. If I changed John to have accounting, it just changed my sum if and it changed my count if. So no matter where they're at, if this data changes, these formulas will automatically change. I'm going to do another formula. I want to get an average if. I'm going to go to K2. This time I'm going to say I want to get an average of those salaries, but only if their department is sales. I'm going to do equal AV, equal AV. From the dropdown, I'm going to double click on average if. By going to the average if, it wants to know first, what is the range to evaluate? This is just like the sum if, but the answer will be different. So the range that I want it to evaluate is the department, comma, I want it to find the criteria of the word sales, comma, the range that I wanted to get the average out of is the salaries. So I'm going to choose salary, control enter, and it's going to give me the average of every person in the accounting department based on their current salaries. So we can be using a lot of these different functions to help us manage our data and get answers that we may need to get to give to someone. So if someone says, well, what's going on? Do we need to kind of change? We only have so much in our budget. Do we have enough money in the account to be able to add in a new marketing person? Well, what is the average salary there? We can use these functions to gather any types of information that we would need. But of course, Excel has a lot of other types of functions built in as well. When it comes to working with these employees, a lot of times we're going to want to look up information. So let's say that I could even be on a different sheet. I don't have to be with my employee information here, but I'm going to go up to rows 1 and 2, where I have employee ID, name, department, data hire, etc. going across. I could actually create a formula that can look up the employee ID number out of a, million rows going down and locate the person's name for me. But right now, column G doesn't have a full name. We have a last name and first name. We don't have a full name. I'm going to first fill in the full name by going to G6. I'm going to use a feature called Flash Fill, where it's going to see my pattern of what I type in and fill in the rest of the information down the column for me. So I'm going to go to G6 and I'm going to put in the first person's first name and last name.
Hey, Julian, while you're
yes.
adding a person here, George kind of has a related question. He said, if you add 10 employees to this list, will the established name range be adjusted?
Not by default.
Okay.
If it's a table, yes. And by the way, tables are named ranges. Oh. So a table will automatically adjust, a named range does not. So if I went and added 10 more employees, I'd have to go back and change the range. And where I would go to do that is the formulas tab of the ribbon. On the formulas tab, I'm going to click name manager. And if I go back to departments, I can double click to open it, to edit, and down at the bottom, I could change it to be 6-3 instead of 5-3. When I click OK, that named range now includes those extra rows. I would do that same thing with the salary. I would change that to be a 6-3. So they match. Okay.
That's simple enough.
Yes, it actually is pretty easy. So what I wanted to do with these names is I physically typed in the first one to give the computer the pattern I want it to follow. So the first person I added in, I'm going to go to the data tab of the ribbon. And in the data tools group on the right-hand side, I'm going to click on this icon called Flash Fill. It just filled in all of the first and last names following the pattern I gave it with the first one. I could have done last name, comma, first name. I could have told it to also do it in uppercase or lowercase because it follows the casing of whatever I typed in for my pattern. I love the Flash Fill. It is a great way to either combine information together, it concatenates it. Otherwise, it also will pull information from something. So if I had a combination of first and last name and I needed them to be separated, last name, first name, I could pull those out of the full name. I could do the opposite of what I just did. Pretty cool. But anyway, back to my formula again. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I want to be able to do a formula that is going to find the full name based on whichever employee ID number I put in. One way to do that is to use what is referred to as a V lookup. A V lookup, V stands for vertical, where it can look vertically across your data to locate something. The first column is what it will look up based on its table array. Let me explain what I just said. I'm going to walk you through the formula by going to B2. I want it to find the employee ID from A1. I'm going to do that by going equal, the letter V, equal. I'm going to double click on VLOOKUP. It wants to know what is the value I want to look up. I want to look up the value in A2, comma, where is it going to find this value? It's asking for the table array, which is a fancy way of saying the range of cells that it's going to find it in. I'm going to select A6 all the way through G52. A6 through G52. Now, once again, I'm selecting the range. I could have named it. Would have made it easier. But I'll just select it right now. Comma, it needs to know where's the answer going to come from. We need to count the columns across to find the full name. So employee ID is the first column, department is 2, data hire, salary, last name, first name, full name is the 7th column across. So I give it a column index number of 7. So what I'm telling it to do is to look up this employee ID out of this range of cells and look across. Once it finds it in the first column, look across to column 7 and give me the answer. But I'm going to put in a comma after that 7, because do I want it to find an approximate match, or is it a true, or is it an exact match? Couldn't say the word. I want it to be an exact match to that employee ID. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to control enter, and it will automatically match up whatever employee ID number I put in. So it found Eric London, because that's the AB005 that I put in. But one of the difficulties with this is, well, I don't like to count. I don't know about you guys, but what if I had 1,700 columns going across? 1, 2, 3. I have to count them across to tell it where the answer is going to come from. I don't like to do that. Plus, what if I enter an invalid employee ID number? It's going to give us a generic error called NA. And if somebody comes in and sees that, they're going to think they did something wrong. Well, it's an invalid employee. Now, technically, I could add an if error, another if function. I could add an if error to this formula. But I got to tell you, I don't do that. I don't do these formulas anymore. We actually have a newer function that's been added. I don't use the H lookup. I don't use the V lookup or the lookup function, the max, the index, none of them. I strictly use an X lookup now. Let me show you how easy an X lookup could be. I'm going to go back to, well, actually, let me say that I want to get the department and the data hire for this employee. If I'm going to do it as a VLOOKUP, I have to actually do those as separate formulas. With an XLOOKUP, I can do them both at the same time. Because of the way that this data is organized, it has department, then it has date of hire, can't talk. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to create the same formula to look up that ID number, but I'm going to do it with an XLOOKUP. So I'm going to equal XLOOKUP. With a VLOOKUP, the first column has to be the lookup value for your table array. It couldn't look up salary. It couldn't look up full name. It has to be looking up whatever is the first column. With an X lookup, it doesn't. It could be any column within your range. What it wants to know first is, what is the lookup value? I'm going to have it look up the employee ID, but if all my names were unique, I could have it look up their full name. So in reality, I could say, so what's your name? And I could start typing their name and it's going to find their corresponding information. But I'll do the employee ID again. I'm going to do a comma. It wants to know, well, where am I going to find that employee ID? It wants to know my lookup array. I'm going to choose A6 down through A52. Now, of course, I normally would have these named. Comma, it wants to now know, where's the answer going to come from? The answer is going to come from the department and the data hire. I'm going to select 2 columns for the answer. I'm going to select B6 through C52. B6 through C52, but this formula could go further. Optional is, I'm going to put in a comma, optional is to say, what if not found? If that employee ID number is not found, we can give it an error built right into one formula. I'm going to say employee ID not found. It has to be in quotes because it is text. And I'm going to press comma again because I can actually say, do I want an exact match? Or do I actually want to do an exact match or the next smallest value? Or an exact match or the next highest value? Goes way beyond the true false capabilities that a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP always had. I'm going to do 0 for an exact match. I'm going to control enter, and it's going to tell me employee ID not found. That's because it's an invalid ID number. But because I built in that error, it automatically will display it. Now, of course, if I go back to this employee ID and put in a real ID number, it's going to automatically match up. And notice that it did both the department and the data hire. Now, the data hire is a serial number. I need to go back and format that. Sorry. So it automatically will find their hire date. So an X lookup can look up multiple things with one formula. And it's easier because we just select, here's where you're going to find it from. It doesn't have to be the first column. And here's where the answer is coming from. It can do vertical and horizontal. It does both. So I don't use an HLOOKUP. I don't even use a VLOOKUP. I use this 99% of the time. It's just smarter. It's a smarter formula. I honestly said out loud when it came out, what took Microsoft so long to do this? I really did. I was talking to a coworker or a friend of mine and about Excel, and I was just like, I can't believe it took them this long to give us this. This is so easy. I absolutely love it. And it's easy to understand, really. You know, once you've done one and we understand an array is a range of cells, it works great. Okay. So anyway, that would be my spiel on, you know, kind of using these lookup functions. The last thing that I want to do for our last few minutes here is create a chart. You may have already created a chart before, but there's a lot of different things we can actually do with charts. So I want to kind of take you a little bit further on it. So I'm going to go to this quarterly sales worksheet. I'm going to select a range of cells, and I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and I'm going to click Recommended Charts. Most of the time, that's what I do. Even though I've been using Excel since it first was released, I still come into Recommended Charts, which we just got a few versions ago. But because, do I know what chart type I should use? Sometimes I want to mix things up. Let me see what the computer recommends me to use. So based on the data I selected, I get live previews. Line charts, stacked column charts, funnel charts, scattered charts. These are going to be everything that the computer is recommending. If I want to use one of these, I click on it from the left, I click OK, and I automatically get a chart. So we can create a very professional looking chart in just a couple of seconds, because once I have this chart, I can move it where I want it, I can resize it, but I typically go straight to the ribbon to the chart design tab. We have a chart gallery of styles that we can change the formatting very quickly. So if I want to change its appearance, I click on the style that I want. It can even add different elements to the chart, and I'm done. Of course, if I change my mind, because I do that all the time, I could go back and change it. Or I could go to quick layouts. Quick layouts can also change the appearance of my chart. It can give me different elements. It can add or remove legends and whatever else we need. So when we look at a chart like this, it automatically is analyzing the original data, and the value axis on the left only goes just above, based on your increments of numbers, it goes just above the highest value. So the highest value was 10,000. So it is currently going up to 12,000. What if I want it to be 20,000? I want to show that we want to get to 20,000. I can go to the value axis on the left and double click. When I double click on this left-hand side, it's going to open this format access pane on the right. These are going to be all the tools available for manage whichever element you clicked on. So I happen to be on the value axis. So here it's showing me the maximum number is 12,000. I'm going to change that to be 20,000. And what if I want my major units, which is my increments, to be in 5,000s? I could change this 2,000 to a 5,000. And it's updating my chart as I make these changes. So just because the computer does something doesn't mean you can't change it. Here in a chart, it's a matter of first double click on something to open this pane. Then whatever you click on, it's going to change the tools on the right-hand side to match the object, the element that you click on. Whether it's the legend, it's the categories, it's one of the series, it's the grid line, it's the plot area, it's the chart area, the chart title, whatever you click on, it will select it, give you the tools on the right-hand side. But I'm going to go back to the value axis, and on the right-hand side, when I go back into my value axis, sorry, I got to get back into the, by the way, when I come in here to the value axis again, there's multiple tabs going across the top for each one of these elements that you click on. Not all of them have exactly the same things, but you should investigate all of those so you can see exactly what each one is. I'm going to expand out these access options, by the way, and I'm going to reset the maximum number, and I'm going to reset my major units to put it back to the defaults. So usually what the default is what I want. But if I'm trying to do a fundraiser and we've only raised 10,000 and we want to raise 100,000, I want to put in 100,000 as my max units. So just so you know, it is something that you could change if you needed to. So each part of the chart is considered an element. It's directly connected back to your Excel. So the data on the Excel matches. If I go to my spreadsheet and I change the information on my spreadsheet, it's going to automatically update the chart. And it does not matter where the chart is. A lot of times my charts are someplace else on a different sheet. But one last chart that I wanted to quick show you is on the maps. I have this geographical data here. I have two sets of geographical data, countries and numbers and states. We actually have built-in map options. In Excel, we can create a filled map based on geographical data, whether it's in the USA or it's across the country. Just so you know, there are map capabilities. There's also a 3D map that we could be creating that opens up another application where we could actually create videos and show things increasing and decreasing over time. But I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that map. It was super easy. I just have to have geographical data, select it, and then choose map. Then, of course, I have my different map styles and stuff that I can be using. I got quick layouts just like I did with the other options too. Okay. Wow, that was a lot of information in a short period of time. But I hoped everybody learned a few new tricks, a few new formulas that you may not have been using before that can help you to analyze your data a little bit further. Jacob, did we have any questions from the audience?
Jolyn, I have not seen any. Feel free to shoot some off as we're here. We've got a little time here. Jolyn, I think this was a great tool. There's a lot of ways you can utilize Excel,
Mhm.
but to really get into the nitty gritty, leaders are using, obviously, you're managing teams, especially if you're managing a company. You got a lot of large data sets, a lot of
Yes,
tables, a lot of large tables. So you're trying to navigate through those, and they're complex tables. So I think this was spot on, if you're in that role. Just to be able to get through these things and make your day that much faster. I'm sure there's
right.
people, scrolling through, 100 column tables, and these little different tips and tricks here, just navigating that makes that day to day just that much quicker.
Yeah.
you know
And named ranges is huge.
yep.
So many different parts of Excel can take advantage of those named ranges. I just demonstrate a couple today. Oh my goodness, I use it for everything. I
Yeah.
love named ranges.
The skills within Excel are just almost, there's no ceiling. So
No,
absolutely incredible.
I
Well,
learn something new all the time in Excel. And I'm a Microsoft Master instructor, and I still don't know everything because there are over 400 different functions. There's like
incredible.
50 just in the engineering category alone. And I'm not an engineer, so I don't
Sure.
understand.
Sure. Yeah, definitely something that is almost a lifetime mastery here.
Yes.
Well, before we go, I just want to remind everybody, October 24th, back to the Tuesday afternoons, it's Microsoft Loop, and it should be something interesting.
Mhm.
Microsoft is always adding in interconnected apps, and they seem to always, for the most part, work really well with everything else. Especially once they get it down pat. I also wanted to mention, within about 24 hours after this session, you should get a survey, and you can let us know how this session went, and you can also give us ideas of your own on future topics. We love to hear from you guys, and we make this for you. So if there's trending topics coming up, we want to know about it, because that's the things that you want to learn, that's the things we want to teach. So certainly check that out as well. And Jolyn, thank you so much, and thank you for
Absolutely.
everybody joining us. I know people are on their way out the door, but thank you again.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Jacob.